This is Life Admin Life Hacks, a podcast that gives you techniques, tips and tools to tackle your life admin more efficiently, to save your time, your money and improve your household harmony.
I'm Dinah Roberts, an operations manager. As a naturally organised person, but I've still got a lot to learn.
I'm Mia Northrop, a researcher and writer, and I'm currently in a stage of peak life admin.
This episode, we interview Ellen Jackson.
Hello and welcome to Life Admin Life Hacks. Welcome to Season 5. We're thrilled to have said goodbye to 2020 and are feeling very optimistic about 2021, and we hope you are too. If you're new to the show, hello, thanks for listening. Get ready to make 2021 your most organised year yet. If you've been patiently waiting for us to return from hiatus, thanks for staying loyal. We've got great interviews and topics lined up for the next 10 episodes. Diane and I have been working on our Life Admin Makeover book, which is due to be published at the start of 2022. So this will give you a one-stop shop to get your life admin under control. And we're also working on a monthly newsletter that's going to kick off next couple of weeks. This will include links to our episodes, worksheets, checklists, templates, stuff you can download and use, and we'll curate content from around the web that'll help you lift your life admin game. If you want to subscribe, head to our website, Life Admin Life Hacks. You can also connect with us via Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, depending on your social media preferences.
This episode, as we kick off the season, is going to be one of our How They Do It episodes. We've decided to interview other people from business, media, creative industries to see how they tackle life admin and to give us advice. In this episode, we talked to Ellen Jackson, host of the Potential Psychology podcast, who revealed how mindset is as important as process when it comes to life admin. How you need to adjust your expectations and let go of control if you really want to share the load. And how the 5 dimensions of personality impact how you might approach life admin. If you've ever wondered why some people are more organised and motivated than others, this ep is for you.
Ellen Jackson is a psychologist, host of the Potential Psychology podcast, internationally published writer, speaker, coach, and consultant to organisations Australia-wide. Ellen has a personal passion for self-care and individual wellbeing to beat stress and help you to live your best life. Her work includes one-on-one coaching, primarily online, and everything she teaches is supported by scientific research, so we know it works. Ellen's 6-word purpose statement, which I love, I think I'm going to find one of these for myself next year: help others live, learn, and flourish.
Ellen, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you both for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
Mira and I were so excited when you said you'd come on the show because we're both avid listeners to your podcast. In particular, we love some of your work around motivation, which we think is so relevant when it comes to the tricky tasks of life admin, things like taxes and things like that. So I'd love to hear when you first became sort of life admin aware and realised that it was a thing that you're going to have to deal with.
Oh, that is such a good question. When did I become life admin aware? Well, I suppose it comes in phases, doesn't it? So, we're all aware when we start a first job or leave home, and then perhaps first time I bought a house was on my own. I guess they come in stages of suddenly having to deal with things like, even goodness, tax. Even realizing you've got to do your tax. So it's a gradual progression, but I guess probably like for many people, it intensified upon the arrival of children. Mm-hmm. When suddenly you are responsible for more than just yourself, you are responsible for other people. And then I remember even, goodness me, having just had my first baby, which was a pretty intense experience in itself, adjusting to that, and then having to complete the birth registration paperwork.
Yeah.
Forever, because sitting down and actually focusing on something like paperwork was just not in my repertoire at that moment. So, it's probably gradually intensified over the years. It for me maybe peaked when my children were toddlers and I was still adjusting to who does what in our household and how to manage that.
Yeah, it's an interesting moment when you have less time to do paperwork, but it's also exploded. So I think when I had my baby and those first forms come, they are the beginning of a lot of form filling out for your children.
It's bonkers. It's really
It is
bonkers that
bonkers.
they would do that. That somebody hasn't thought that through. They say, oh, here's somebody who's just had a baby. Let's give them, a couple of hours worth of paperwork today. But anyway, hopefully the
And
systems have improved a bit in the last 10. It's been almost 10 years since I did it.
And so as it did progress, as it did mount over time, did your approach to it become more sophisticated, or was it sort of an ad hoc thing that you did here and there as it got more organized as you've gone along?
Look, I'm not a naturally, I wouldn't say I'm disorganized, but I'm not a naturally administrative person, put it that way. It doesn't, I'm a bigger picture, creative ideas kind of person, perhaps. So I'm not sure I've ever really come up with something that I would call a system or a series of systems. A lot for me around managing admin and life admin has been around mindset and how I manage my mindset.
Oh, tell us more about that.
Well, I suppose, again, a gradual progression and perhaps on the back of that peak of I'd returned to work. My husband was studying at the time and he was responsible then for he was then 1 year old, our eldest son. And I found myself trying to do all of the home admin, all of my own work. I run a business, plus at the time I'd returned to a kind of a pretty intense contract role 3 days a week. And I was trying to, I suppose, manage everything to do with the toddler and his life and, sort of making sure all the food was prepped and packing the baby bag and doing those sorts of things, and suddenly realised that this was insane. And I didn't actually need to do it. Yeah, it was realising that I didn't need to do it, that I wasn't actually doing anyone, including myself, a favour by taking on all of that additional responsibility and backing off and saying, my husband's a grown up and he's well capable of working out what this kid needs to eat and what he's going to need if they go out for the day. And if he didn't do it the way I did it, and I think this is the big thing because we still have this conversation, if he didn't do it the way I would have done it, if the meals were different or he didn't have everything sort of, organised to the hilt with everything you could possibly ever need for some kind of minor crisis with a toddler, then, no one was going to die. He would manage, he would cope, they would both cope. And as soon as I got to that realization, it allowed me to step away from a huge amount of work that I was really just making for myself.
I think that's very relatable to listeners who might carry the mental or have in the past carried that mental load plus working on all the logistics of their household life. It is too much for one person to carry. So how did you have that conversation with your partner at the time? How did you balance things out?
Well, I can't remember at the time because we're talking 12 years ago, but we actually just had the same conversation only a week or so ago.
Yeah, it's something that has to be negotiated.
Yeah, well, it is. It's an ongoing conversation, and I can't remember exactly. I think we were talking about, managing screen time or, getting a younger one to get tasks done more promptly. And he sort of had a view on how he should do it or we should do it. And I should do it. And of course, I had a different view. And it was just a conversation that got, I won't say heated, but it was, it was firm.
Enthusiastic.
Yeah, it was enthusiastic, yes. And I said, look, at the end of the day, you parent your way, I will parent my way. We do need to have some consistency, but our fundamental values and fundamental approaches are the same. That's not an issue. There's obviously clearer or bigger things to deal with if you've got a fundamentally different approach to parenting in terms of your value set. But for us, when it comes to just these, how you discipline or how you have a conversation, I just, it did become, you do it your way, I will do it my way. We both know we have the best interests of the children and our family harmony at heart, but I'm not going to adopt your style and I don't expect you to adopt mine if we both believe that our own approaches will work.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Have you seen that cartoon from that French illustrator Emma about the concept of the mental load?
Was that one that came out a little while ago?
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think so, yes.
But it is interesting that it's that idea that when the first child is born, that things really shift. And unless you have some deliberate conversations, it doesn't change. And that traditionally the mother takes more of the load simply because they usually do that first stint of parenting. So how heavy do you think your mental load is now in terms of your household compared to, say, your work life? And do you think it's different?
I was thinking about that last night, actually, and my work situation. So I work 3 days a week running a community leadership program here in Ballarat, which is a joyful job, but quite an intense job. And then I run my own business. I often say, in theory, the other 2 days a week, but in practice, it's the other 4 days a week. And we have 2 kids who are 12 and 9, both boys, who are busy and have sports and all of that kind of stuff. And I host a podcast and, there's a lot. And in my mind, they're not delineated one from the other. It's just, especially because of, the way I involve myself in my work and especially the stuff that I do for myself, that is just life. It's all just life. So the mental load is high. I have increasingly, again, reminded myself, in the same way that I had that conversation, or my husband and I had that conversation early on, I'm now having those conversations with my 12-year-old. He has literally just finished year 6. And so he is now big enough, old enough and capable enough to take on some of the admin himself. But I have to catch myself, I have to catch myself from saying and just jumping in and solving problems or fixing things or finding things. I have to remind myself consciously, because that's a thinking habit. I've got a habit of looking after him and solving his problems and finding things for him over many years in the same way that I have in the past. And I still have a tendency to sometimes jump in and solve things for my husband because he has a habit of expecting me to. So now it's the conversation with my, 12-year-old. If he says, "Oh, Mum, I need this or I need to organise that," I say, "Well, you get it all. You find what you need. You get it all organised, and then you come to me with it, and we will do whatever's required to, do the final bit, whether it's purchasing something or getting something signed or, fixing something." The other day he wanted his shirt ironed for graduation. That was it. So I said, okay. And at the time I was busy doing 100 things, as you do, and I had to catch myself and I said, right, okay, no worries. I can help you with that. I will show you how to do it. You go and get the ironing board, set it up, get the iron, fill it with water. And so it's sort of just reminding yourself to do those little pieces and to think about it in terms of developing their life skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what other life admin tasks do you think are important to teach your children so that they do develop that independence? So there's sort of, household stuff around looking after themselves. Where do you think you'll start in terms of extending that responsibility?
Yeah, that is a really good question, and it's something I've not really thought about it in terms of some of life admin, although I do, and remote schooling was an interesting task this year, being in Victoria and having 2 of them at home for such a long period, starting to have conversations about, even if it's finding things on your laptop and organising things. And quite often I do find myself saying, this is training you to be a grown-up. This is training you to be an adult. And yes, it's boring and yes, it's frustrating, but this is part of what it is. And you don't get the fun stuff. You don't get the independence. Again, with my 12-year-old now, we're allowing him a lot of independence. He has a lot of overnight stays with friends. He's out and about with his mates, and you don't get that unless you also learn the more irritating, frustrating things.
It's 2 sides of that.
Yeah.
that growing up coin.
It is absolutely. So I haven't given it a huge amount of thought, but I know for me, I'm particularly conscious with 2 sons that they will know how to sew a button back on their shirt, that they will know how to clean a bathroom, that they will know how to clean a toilet, and the fact that toilets need to be cleaned.
Yes.
They will,
We're still working on toilets being flushed in this household at the moment. It's like, come on, everyone.
So, cook a meal, all of those sorts of things, which, are still just contributing factors to the mental load, I suppose. Even for my husband recently, talking about I think he was cooking dinner, or he was on scheduled for dinner duty, and he still phones me up and says, I'm thinking of having this, or, I think, do we have that such and such? I'm like, I'm at work. I don't know. I said, this is the point of you doing the dinner. It's not because I can't cook or won't cook. It's because I don't want to have to think about what we're going to have, whether we're putting ingredients, getting the timing right, et cetera, et cetera. That's all part of it.
Pet peeve, that one. So when it comes to life admin for you, what do you think is most important? Is it peace of mind, saving money, saving time, or household harmony?
For me, it's probably peace of mind. I learned probably in my 20s, so relatively early in my adulthood, that I don't cope well with feeling like I've got too much to do. Some people thrive on that chaos and busyness. I don't. I do like things to feel calm and in control. So when it comes to managing all of the life admin, as soon as that starts to escalate and I'm feeling like I'm losing touch with all the pieces, there's a worry. And it's probably my conscientiousness too. I don't want to not deliver on something. So, as soon as I feel like I'm just starting to lose touch, and I have to say I'm doing that a little bit with high school prep, and that starts to make me feel a bit agitated. So that's probably the primary thing. And then maybe saving time would be the secondary. I'm a big fan of outsourcing. So
yeah, look, that's coming up a lot with the interviews we've been doing lately. But I'm interested more in about what science tells us about personality and how that might impact your approach to life admin. Sort of, you mentioned, there's the sort of conscientiousness that you have.
Yeah.
And in some of your episodes where you've talked about different personality traits, how might that impact your approach to life admin?
Well, look, I think that has a huge impact. I'm a big believer in self-awareness for managing every aspect of your life, understanding who you are and what drives and motivates you and how you like to operate in the world. Because when you have that information and that knowledge, it can help you to manage around those sorts of things, I suppose. So for me, yes, being, knowing that I'm a conscientious person, knowing that I don't like to feel overwhelmed and overloaded means that as soon as I start to get to that point, I can sort of recognize it and understand it and say, yes, this is what I need to do. I need to have a day where I can sit down and just make sure I'm getting on top of those emails, for example, because otherwise I will start to feel agitated and stressed. Different people have very different styles. Some people are far less fussed about those sorts of things. Some people are far less conscientious in the sense that if things do, and I've had to train myself a little bit like this to remind myself that, no one will die if I don't hit every deadline every time.
You don't tick everything off that list.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes there's a bit of wiggle room. If, you're highly conscientious, that will cause anxiety if things aren't going to meet deadline. Some people are far more relaxed and casual in life generally, which is a lovely way to be.
Yeah, I'm jealous of those people.
Me too.
We are all different.
So with personality traits, there are sort of the big 5 personality traits. Can we go through them and talk about how that might play out? Because is conscientiousness one of them?
Yes, it is. So the best way to think about the best way to remember the big 5 personality factors is they make up the acronym OCEAN.
Okay.
So openness to experience, and this is going to test me now. I haven't. Openness to experience is basically your openness to try new things, to experience different things in the world, to be, I guess, a bit curious and a bit exploratory, and that is a dimension. I mean, the thing to think about with personality, and one of the traps I think we often fall into when we've been used to perhaps tools like the Myers-Briggs or MBTI or the DISC or some of these profiling tools, is that they tend to put you into boxes that say, you are an INTJ and therefore this is what you will do. And that, certainly from a scientific perspective, is not how personality works. All of these dimensions sit on a spectrum and we can be anywhere along that spectrum. So with openness to experience, for example, you can be exceedingly open and you're a risk taker and you'll have a go at anything, and, that's just where you are. Others will be right at the other end of the spectrum where the possibility of any change or anything new might feel incredibly disconcerting. And
so would that
somewhere in the middle.
would that impact the way you might, decide to try new technology or try, a new app on your phone or establish new habits?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
If you're, further up the, I'm sort of pointing with my head here, which of course no one can see, further towards the, one extreme of openness, then you will try new things. You'll experiment with things and have a go and be prepared to fail at it far more readily. Now, those are still trainable skills to some extent. So personality is, behavior is malleable. So while your fundamental personality might not change, you can absolutely develop new skills and move yourself a little way further along a spectrum. And that's part of the growth mindset when it comes to openness, that willingness to try new things, to accept failure as part of learning.
Get out of your comfort zone.
Get out of your comfort zone. But as a natural tendency, some will be just that way more inclined than others.
Okay, so we've got openness,
so
and C is conscientiousness.
So conscientiousness, which we've spoken about. So yes, that's kind of that wanting to fulfill your responsibilities and meet deadlines and, do everything that's asked of you. Again, it can be a shackle. It can be a good thing. It's actually quite predictive. People high in conscientiousness, I understand, it's quite a good predictor of success in life because you will get things done. But, in terms of stress and anxiety, it's not always such a good thing.
Yep. You can burn out.
The next one, E, it's called the extroversion scale. So it's degrees of extroversion. Now, most of us understand extroversion as being kind of, one end and introversion being the other. But it's known as the extroversion scale in that particular personality framework, I guess. And so that is just the degree to which you get energy from being around other people, how much you might like to think things through by talking them out versus thinking things through by thinking them in your head before you speak.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's an element of that. The energy that you get from people. So I am naturally quite introverted. I can get up and speak in front of large groups. I spend my life, interacting with other people. It's not a matter of not being able to do it. It's a matter of how much energy it sucks from you, basically. So for an introverted person, you might extrovert, all day or for a couple of days, but you'll probably then want some time on your own, in your own space and in your own head to re-energize, and it's the opposite for extrovert or people who are further at the end of the extroversion scale. They can struggle to spend time on their own and alone without it being draining.
Oh, it's an interesting thing. If I was thinking about that, how it would apply to life admin, talking about whether you like to think things through in your head or talk things out. If you have a partner and you're trying to work out a better approach to doing something or having those decide, we need to compare our home loan. We need to switch home loans and talking through the process and the options, how you'd like to process that information. It's good to be aware of what your preferences are and your partner's perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a different style and a different approach, and that will play a part in how you do everything, basically.
Yeah. Okay, so we have OCE, A.
A is agreeableness, which is essentially how nice you are.
Can that change? Is that set stone or is that a dimension that you can work on as well?
There is always an environmental context for all of these things and how they play out. But agreeableness is how much you are keen to get along with other people. So people who are very high up the agreeableness dimension would probably be very uncomfortable with conflict. They want to get along well with everyone and they just have an agreeable personality, I suppose. At the other end, you're far less concerned with how others perceive you. Conflict doesn't faze you. We're all sitting somewhere. Again, the majority of us sit somewhere in the middle, but you get people at either end. And, the thing to remember with personality, and sometimes we have these layperson terms, we think, nobody wants to be at the not nice end, but there's pros and cons to everything. If you're always at the very agreeable end, it's you don't want to doormat yourself to other people. You don't want to
people pleaser mode.
Yeah, you don't want to end up with some blurry boundary issues. So I think that's where the awareness. If we have an awareness of how we are, then we can start to put structures and habits and behaviours in place that keep us in a good, positive frame of mind wherever we sit on the spectrum.
And then N, is that neuroticism?
It is neuroticism.
I listened to your podcast. I've been listening.
So yes, N is neuroticism, which is it's really I suppose a kind of an anxiety type scale to some extent. It's about how. Well, if you think about, that layperson term about being neurotic, it's people who get very antsy about things or get very stressed about things or get very upset about things that others find far less stressful. So again, a dimension like all of them.
Oh, it's fascinating. And I think, a lot of the time Dinah and I are talking about self-awareness being key to deciding, if you need to establish a new habit related to life admin, or if you need to change the tools you're using, say, if you're doing budgeting and you've been using something clunky and we've got suggestions around new apps, there can be a lot of resistance to that kind of change, or having to have discussions with your partner about the way you're going to approach something. Having this self-awareness about how your personality is made up just helps you come up with approaches that are going to be more successful for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I say I think self-awareness in every aspect of life and understanding how you operate and how you function, and also how others will be different. I think that's one of the key things. If we go back, we mentioned before about that Myers-Briggs, which again, from a scientific point of view is not a reliable personality indicator. But at a just basic introduction to the concept of individual difference, which is what we kind of term this field of psychology, understanding how people differ, that is enormously helpful just to be able to say, this is why I take this approach. This is why I get really stressed if we haven't filled in the forms in time or we haven't managed to get on top of this volume of tasks. It's because I am high in conscientiousness and say my partner is not. He, in our case, loves to delve into the phone contracts and negotiate better deals on the mortgage and do all of that sort of stuff that kills me. I have no interest in doing that. But, it's about accepting and appreciating and hopefully realizing that often we complement each other. Yeah. And we can kind of say, okay, well, that's, you love to do that. You're good at that. You go ahead and do it. And, I will answer questions or help where I can, but don't expect me to get as passionate or as interested in it as you are.
Someone in the household needs to, be happy to look at comparison
absolutely.
websites.
Yeah, because it's certainly not me.
Yes, I think that's quite interesting because you do talk a lot in your work about helping families thrive and how you share or how you decide what you're going to divide, what you're going to share is really important. So are there any other aspects, I guess, of your life admin in your family that or systems or how you've shared it that help improve your family life?
I do believe, and it sort of parallels this, that we should all play to our strengths. That psychologically, if we can play to our strengths, understand who we are, and divide things up accordingly, so that we're doing things that give us more energy and fewer of the things that really drain us. Now, obviously, life admin. Well, I suppose we've had some examples there. Some people really do get into doing that. Yeah. And so doing those and recognizing that I'm doing this. And I think this is where your own expectations of self come in as well. I know that there are tasks that I do, like ironing. I'm one of the few remaining people of my generation who iron, but I do it because I get a really intrinsic sense of satisfaction from the process and the outcome. Now, that may seem weird to some people. I fully appreciate that seems weird to some people. And sometimes when I get really frustrated because I look at the ironing pile and I just go, oh my God, that's out of control. And then I can have a conversation with myself and say, well, you can let this go because this is your rule. You made this standard for yourself and you can let it go if you want to. And
I find this fascinating. I've never had an ironing pile because I just don't iron. You should see the dress I'm wearing now.
It makes so much more sense not to.
But there'd be other things that I would be totally hung up on. And everyone's got that thing that's important to them for whatever reason. Doesn't always have to be rational.
Exactly.
And I guess that's where outsourcing comes in as well. It's like if it's not, there's no motivation from my part or a partner's part, let's just get someone else to do it entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a fan of outsourcing. I've done it less so in our home life recently, although I'm looking forward to getting somebody to clean the house again. I've done that in the past, but certainly in my business life, I outsource a lot of my business admin because it's just not a way. I do remember my sister giving me a really good tip, and I've incorporated this into my business life, but it's absolutely worthwhile in personal life as well. And that is just about valuing your time. If you put a price on your time and said, well, my time is worth $50 an hour or $100 an hour or $300 an hour or whatever it is there somebody that I can pay to do some of these tasks who will charge me less than that? And, that is a really useful way to think about it, I think.
Yeah. And one of Dinah and my favourite episodes of yours was titled Everything You Know About Motivation is Wrong. And we know that, people find it hard to get on top of their life admin and set up new systems or set up habits or, get motivated about ironing or get motivated about cleaning, whatever it might be. Tell us about the latest science on motivation.
Yeah. So the reason I called it that, aside from it just being a bit of a cheeky title, was that we still do largely have a very old-fashioned concept of motivation and how motivation works at a human level. We still think of it very much in terms of punishment and reward or positive and negative reinforcement. And we do that with our kids. We'll say, right, unless you tidy your room, you don't get screen time. Often these things work, but they work very short term, and they have a risk of doing damage to relationships. So, kids start to resent you over time if it's always this battle over you do this or I'll do that kind of approach. And that happens internally with our own self-motivation as well. We tend to punish ourselves if we don't do things. And usually that punishment is a form of kind of personal beration, that dialogue that we have or monologue that we have in our own heads where we say, why can't you just do this? You're hopeless. You just need to get motivated. You don't have any willpower. And we have that conversation with ourselves about our perceived failures at staying motivated to either change a habit, start a new task, get things done on time, whatever it might be. And the long-term implication of that is a poor relationship with yourself, effectively. If you are constantly berating yourself for not getting things done or not having enough willpower or for failing, that knocks your self-esteem around, it knocks your general well-being around. It's just not a good conversation to be having with yourself. And what we've discovered, and I say we very loosely, what my amazing psychological colleagues and scientists and researchers have discovered it's really something that's been around for about 30 years, but has probably had there's been far less discussion of it, less awareness of it in the general population, is that's not how motivation works, that there are actually these fundamental elements to it. It's called self-determination theory. I won't go into it now because it takes a long
We'll link to the episode in the show notes.
Yeah, link to the episode in the show notes. Excellent idea. But basically it says that there are three things that we need to have to really be intrinsically motivated. So to have that kind of motivation that just it's almost like you can't stop yourself from doing something. And motivation, like personality, also sits on a spectrum. I have a colleague who likes to say that we are a bundle of motivations, which I think is just a lovely way of putting it, because we will do things for a number of different reasons. But for that key intrinsic motivation that I can't stop myself from doing this, it gives me energy to do it, we need to have a sense of autonomy. So we have a sense of control over our ability to do something. We need to have what's called relatedness. So connection to other people is really important in terms of context. It's about our relationship, doing things with other people. So, human beings are very social animals, even the most introverted of us. And so when we can tie other people into what we're doing, even if that's just a conversation, it doesn't mean we're doing it for someone else, but having the support, having the care, having the kindness, having just some element of human connection in what we're doing. So it comes back to that relationship piece. If you're talking about how you help a child to find the motivation to do a task, showing that you care, showing that you're having this conversation with them because they're important to you, because you want to help them and assist them, they then get that sense of relatedness that is going to be intrinsic to that motivation.
Interesting. So it's not necessarily that they're going to keep you sort of accountable. It's a little broader than that.
No, yeah. I mean, it could be that they're going to keep you accountable, but it doesn't have to be. So, this is not straightforward, transactional stuff. This is transformational stuff. So it's complex. There's lots of pieces to it, but it is quite a different way of thinking about motivation and moving away from that straight punishment reward, whether that's, in our interactions with someone else or interactions with ourselves. And then the third element is competence. So having a sense of competence about the task that we're doing. Yeah, the mastery piece. So if we're asking ourselves to do something like establish a new habit, say you've never run in your life and you've decided that you're going to set yourself a goal to run a marathon. This is not a goal I've ever set for myself, but
me neither.
Say that's your goal. And what happens is, in order to have the intrinsic motivation to get out there and train, we have to feel that this is something that's actually achievable for us. We have to feel that we are competent. And often what we do, and, timely to be thinking about this when we think about New Year's resolutions, often what we do is we set ourselves these big ambitious goals and we don't think through all the kind of steps and the, granularity in getting to that. And that's where things fall over because, we've had this intention to run a marathon, but we've never run before. And we set a big goal that just wasn't intrinsically motivating enough because at some level we're telling ourselves, who do you think you're kidding? You're never going to run a marathon. So, having to find the competence, which often means breaking that goal down into something much smaller and much more realistic and much more attainable in the short term, and then building on that as you go.
Yeah, I think that third element of motivation is so relevant to life admin. When you think about things like taxes, and people just feel so overwhelmed by the thought of it, and not knowing where to start becomes such a big barrier to being motivated to get going on sorting something out.
Absolutely.
And we know from writers like BJ Fogg and James Clear who write about habits or tiny steps, taking tiny steps, chunk it down to the tiniest increments so you can steadily work your way there rather than going from 0 to 100 and thinking, I'm going to run a marathon next year without thinking, let's start with a 30-minute walk around the block.
Yeah, absolutely. And the goals that you set for yourself have to be meaningful. So doing your tax, for example, that's not an intrinsically motivating task, I don't think, for anybody.
It is for me, Ellen, sadly.
Well, but there are ways of framing it up in your mind to find those access points to motivation. So is it, for a lot of people, that's about the refund that they might receive, that there's the motivation in there. I've just got to get through this. If that's not the position you're in, you've got to find another way to frame it up.
It's also an area where you've got really high competence.
Yeah, exactly.
That takes you about an hour. So
for most of us, it's kind of like, I don't even know where to start finding what I need. And so the competence is very low. There's not a lot of relatedness in doing your tax return, trying to find an access point for relatedness. Why am I doing this? How am I doing this? How does this involve other people in some way? Now, there could be an accountability element in there, in terms of being accountable to, I know for me, I've outsourced a lot of my stuff and now I have bookkeepers who do a lot of the prep and, an accountant who helps me with the final pieces. And if I don't get around, as I haven't, and I'm sitting here looking at it now, to signing the, reviewing and signing the forms, I start to feel again my conscientiousness accountable to those people.
Yeah, it's interesting because I noticed the tax office are now showing, when they give you your statement, they show where your tax dollars were spent. And I don't know whether that's kind of, a subtle trying to shift to why are we doing this? It's to help other people. You use it for welfare payments to help fund the health system, etc. To try and give a little bit of motivation about why you want to pay tax.
That would make it more meaningful. Context is really important. So that absolutely, not for everyone. Again, we're all different. We're all wired up differently, and our motivations are going to be very different. But for us as individuals, it's about tapping into or trying to explore where the motivation is for us in order to get past that barrier of getting started, for example.
Brilliant. I'm wondering whether there's been a life admin hack or task that you feel like years ago was in a messy place, but now you've got it somewhere where it's humming along, or you wish someone had told you earlier about a life admin hack.
One of them has been outsourcing. So, I think, again, this is slightly less around my personal admin, but around my business admin, even and letting go of tasks to allow somebody else to do it. So I have 2 virtual assistants who help me with my business and my business admin, and I have to constantly remind myself. And similarly, I now have, a small team that I can use in my role, in my leadership role, and getting my head around the fact that I don't have to do it, that I can delegate it to other people has been a work in progress, but it's been quite a revelation. And I think that probably goes to the point I made earlier about getting your kids to do things or getting your partner to do things as well. It's that mindset shift around, I don't have to have total control over this. It's to my benefit if I let some of this go, if I hand this over, and it's to their benefit as well, because, when you think about your kids, you want to prepare them for a successful adulthood. So if you never let them do anything themselves, they're never going to get on top of those really important skills that they need to develop. So similarly with a team, how will they ever develop their own skills, progress, learn new things if we hold tight to them ourselves and don't let them go? And I think many of us are guilty of that in different domains of life, of feeling like, oh, I'm the only one who knows how to do this well, or it's just easier for me to do it myself, when in actual fact, longer term, it's not. This is about a bit of short-term paying for long-term gain.
Yeah. Ellen, that's a really thought-provoking place to finish.
So, Ellen, thanks so much. I loved hearing about your thoughts about motivation, about outsourcing and delegation. Such a pleasure. So we've already talked a little bit about one or two of your episodes on your podcast, but where else can our listeners find you if they want to hear more?
Yes, so the Potential Psychology podcast is the podcast, and it's available on all the podcast platforms. I am at potential.com.au, and that links to, I guess, most of what I do in the many ways, shapes and forms, and has my contact details. And then on the socials, I'm Potential Psychology as well.
If you'd like to join us on our Life Admin journey, please head to our Facebook page, Life Admin Life Hacks, to follow us and share your thoughts on what we're doing. And feel free to post any comments or certainly post suggestions that we might be able to use. We hope to see you there.
Thanks for listening. Show notes for this episode are available at lifeadminlifehacks.com. If you're a fan, please subscribe and share the love, and tell a friend or review us in your podcasting app.